I never thought my life would change because of a vintage Hermes scarf, but that's exactly what happened last spring at Second Chance's thrift store. My name is Felicity, and I probably spend way too much time hunting for hidden fashion treasures between racks of other people's cast-offs. But this particular Thursday was different. I had just spotted the distinctive orange box peeking out from under a pile of scarves when another hand reached for it at the same time. "Oh, sorry." A deep voice chuckled. "Ladies first." I looked up to find myself staring into the warmest brown eyes I'd ever seen. The guy was tall, with slightly messy dark hair and a camera slung around his neck. He had that artsy vibe that always made my heart skip a beat. "No, please, go ahead," I said, trying to sound casual while my pulse did a little dance. I was just being nosy anyway. Actually, I could use a second opinion. He picked up the box and carefully opened it. Inside was a pristine silk scarf in swirling shades of blue and gold. "I'm doing a vintage-inspired photo shoot tomorrow, but I know nothing about fashion. Is this something special?" "That's a genuine Hermes scarf from the 1960s, I said, unable to hide my excitement. "See the hand-rolled edges and the artist's signature? It's probably worth at least $500. His eyebrows shot up. "And it's priced at $15? How do you know all this?" "I'm a bit of a fashion nerd. I can spot designer pieces from across the room." I smiled. "I'm Felicity." "Nolan Brooks," he said, extending his hand. "Fashion nerd meets photography nerd. Would you maybe want to grab a coffee and tell me more about vintage fashion? I could really use your expertise for this shoot." That's how it started. Coffee turned into dinner, dinner turned into dating, and 3 months later I was head over heels in love with Nolan. Everything was perfect until I met his sister Celeste. The first time was at their parents' house for Sunday dinner. I'd spent hours choosing the perfect outfit, a vintage Diane von Furstenberg wrap dress I'd scored for $30. Nolan's parents, Evelyn and Gerald, were warm and welcoming, but Celeste's smile never quite reached her eyes. "Oh, how creative of you to wear secondhand clothes," she said, sipping her wine. "I could never." "Who knows where they've been?" "Celeste," Evelyn warned, but her daughter just shrugged. "I'm just saying, if you're going to be part of the Brooks family, you might want to consider upgrading your wardrobe. We have certain standards to maintain." I felt my cheeks burn as Nolan squeezed my hand under the table. Actually, Felicity has an amazing eye for fashion. She's helping style my upcoming magazine shoot. "Really?" Celeste's perfectly manicured eyebrows arched. "How interesting. I just got engaged to Marcus Hale, of Hale Industries. We're planning the wedding of the season." Something in her tone made me uneasy, but I pushed the feeling aside. This was Nolan's sister, after all. I needed to make this work. Later that night, as Nolan drove me home, I caught him glancing at me worriedly. "I'm sorry about Celeste. She can be intense sometimes." "It's fine," I said, even though it wasn't. "She's probably just protective of her family." What I didn't say was how I'd seen Celeste watching me throughout dinner, studying every move I made, every word I spoke. I didn't mention how she'd cornered me in the kitchen and grilled me about my background, my job, my plans for the future. And I definitely didn't tell Nolan about the way she'd smiled when I mentioned wanting a small, intimate wedding someday, a smile that made me feel like I'd just handed her ammunition. I had no idea then that this was just the beginning, that Celeste Brooks was about to turn my life into her own personal chess game. But looking back now, I should have seen it coming. After all, the best vintage pieces always come with a history, and some of them hide dark secrets beneath their beautiful surfaces. The next few weeks were a blur of family dinners and forced smiles. I kept telling myself things would get better with Celeste, but each interaction left me feeling more like an outsider. Tonight was supposed to be different, a casual barbecue at the Brooks house to celebrate Nolan's latest magazine cover. I arrived early to help Evelyn in the kitchen, wearing a vintage Chanel blazer I'd restored myself. As I chopped vegetables, she touched the fabric admiringly. "You have such a gift, Felicity. The way you bring these pieces back to life." She paused, glancing toward the door. I hope you know that, Gerald, and I think you're wonderful for Nolan. Before I could respond, Celeste swept in wearing what looked like this season's entire Gucci collection. Mother, Marcus is bringing his parents tonight. Did you remember to get the expensive wine I asked for? I thought this was just a family dinner, I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. Celeste's laugh was like ice crackling. Oh, didn't Nolan tell you? I turned it into an engagement celebration. Marcus's father is thinking of featuring Nolan's photography in their company's new campaign. She touched my blazer. Is this secondhand? How brave of you. I felt my jaw tighten, but before I could respond, Nolan appeared, wrapping his arms around me from behind. Hey, beautiful. That blazer looks amazing on you. It should, Celeste said. The real thing costs about $12,000. She turned to her mother. We need to set up the formal dining room instead of eating outside. The Hales aren't exactly barbecue people. I watched Evelyn's face fall. She'd spent all day preparing Nolan's favorite grilled dishes. But Nolan understands how important this is for the family, don't you? Celeste's tone was sweet, but her eyes were sharp as she looked at her brother. Maybe we could do both, he suggested, already backing down. Set up inside but keep some food on the grill? I felt my heart sink as Evelyn quietly began moving dishes inside. This was supposed to be Nolan's celebration, but somehow Celeste had hijacked it, just like she seemed to be doing with everything else in our lives. During dinner, I found myself seated between Marcus's mother, who kept asking if my blazer was some kind of costume, and Celeste, who took every opportunity to mention the exclusive designer boutiques she was considering for her wedding dress. Of course, Felicity probably has some creative ideas for her own wedding, Celeste said suddenly, turning to me. What were you thinking? Something vintage, I assume? Table went quiet. Nolan and I hadn't even discussed marriage yet. I felt my face heat up as everyone waited for my response. I haven't really. Oh, that's right, Celeste interrupted. You haven't set a date yet, or even gotten engaged. She patted my hand. Don't worry, when it happens, I'll help you plan everything. After all, I'll have plenty of experience after my wedding. Gerald cleared his throat. Celeste, perhaps we could focus on celebrating Nolan's achievement tonight? Of course, Daddy. Celeste raised her glass. To Nolan's success and to family. Later, as guests were leaving, I overheard Celeste talking to Marcus in the hallway. Poor thing, she tries so hard to fit in. But you can't buy class, can you? I mean, showing up in secondhand clothes to meet your parents? She seemed nice enough, Marcus replied. And that blazer was actually quite elegant. Oh, honey, you're too kind. But trust me, she's not Brooke's material. Nolan will figure that out eventually. I slipped away before they could see me, my hands shaking as I gathered my things. In the kitchen, I found Gerald washing dishes alone. Don't let her get to you, he said quietly, not looking up. Some people mistake cruelty for sophistication. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. As I waited for Nolan to drive me home, I caught my reflection in the window, the proud vintage blazer suddenly feeling like a costume. For the first time, I wondered if loving Nolan was worth the price of admission to his world. What I didn't know then was that Celeste was just getting started. And her next move would force me to choose between keeping the peace and keeping my self-respect. The moment everything changed happened at the Brooks family lake house. Nolan had just proposed the night before, a perfect sunset moment that felt like a dream. I should have known better than to think Celeste would let me have even 24 hours of pure happiness. I was helping Evelyn prepare lunch when I realized I'd left my engagement ring upstairs after washing my hands. As I approached Nolan's old bedroom, I heard Celeste's voice floating through the cracked door. It's actually perfect timing, she was saying. Now I can use all of Felicity's wedding ideas for my own. She'll never suspect I've been collecting them for months. I froze, my hand hovering over the doorknob. Are you sure that's necessary? It was Marcus's voice, sounding uncertain. Your brother just got engaged. Oh, please, their wedding will be some quirky vintage affair. I'm doing everyone a favor by elevating her ideas into something actually sophisticated. Besides, Nolan's been telling me everything: her dress design, the venue she wants, even the antique lace she found for the veil. My stomach lurched. I'd shared those details with Nolan in private moments, dreaming together about our future. He'd promised they were our secrets. Speaking of which, Celeste continued, I already called her dream venue and booked it for the weekend before their date. The deposit cleared this morning. Won't that seem obvious? Marcus asked. That's the beauty of it. She'll look crazy if she accuses me of copying her. After all, I'm the one getting married first now. Everyone will think she's the one copying me. I must have made a sound because the conversation stopped abruptly. I hurried back downstairs, my hands shaking so badly I had to grip the railing. In the kitchen, Nolan was helping his mother with the salad. He smiled when he saw me, but it faded when he noticed my expression. Hey, what's wrong? Can we talk? My voice sounded strange, even to me. Privately. Side on the deck, the lake sparkled mockingly in the summer sun. I turned to face him, fighting to keep my voice steady. Have you been telling Celeste about our wedding plans? Well, yeah, she's been really interested lately. She said she wants to help. He looked confused. Isn't that a good thing? She's planning to steal everything, Nolan. I just heard her talking to Marcus. She's already booked our venue for her wedding, the one I showed you in secret. His face went through a series of emotions: surprise, doubt, defense. Come on, that's got to be a misunderstanding. Celeste wouldn't. Wouldn't what? Deliberately try to hurt me? That's all she's done since we met. The words burst out before I could stop them. You're overreacting, he said, using that placating tone that suddenly made me want to scream. She's my sister, Felicity. She's just excited about weddings right now. Just then, Celeste appeared in the doorway, wearing a concerned expression that made my skin crawl. Is everything okay out here? I thought I heard raised voices. Did you book the Riverside Manor for your wedding? I asked directly. Oh, that. She smiled brightly. Yes, isn't it perfect? I remembered how much you loved it when you mentioned it at dinner last month. I hope you don't mind. Great minds think alike, right? I looked at Nolan, waiting for him to say something to defend me. He shifted uncomfortably. Maybe we could all just what? I interrupted, slipping off my engagement ring. Just pretend this isn't happening? Just let her steal every piece of our wedding like she's been planning for months? Felicity, don't be dramatic, Celeste said, her voice dripping with fake concern. If you're not ready to plan a wedding, just say so. I placed the ring on the deck railing, my vision blurring with tears of rage. You're right. I'm not ready. Not for this family, not for a husband who won't stand up for me. And definitely not for a sister-in-law who treats my life like it's her personal shopping catalog. As I walked away, I heard Nolan call my name, but it was Celeste's voice that followed me. See? I told you she wasn't Brooke's material. I got in my car and drove, not knowing then that this wasn't the end, it was just the beginning of my awakening. 3 days after leaving the lake house, I found myself sorting through vintage dresses at work when Gerald Brooks walked into my shop. He looked out of place among the racks of second-hand clothes, his expensive suit a stark contrast to the worn wooden floors. Interesting place you have here, he said, running his finger along a 1950s Dior dress. Evelyn mentioned you restore these? I nodded, unable to find my voice. Was he here to convince me to come back? To defend Celeste? Nolan's been miserable, he continued, but his tone wasn't accusatory. Though I suspect that's not entirely about losing you. What do you mean? The Hales pulled their advertising campaign. Apparently, Marcus had some concerns about working with our family. He picked up a vintage brooch from the display case. Celeste is blaming you, of course. My hands stilled on the dress I was mending. I haven't spoken to Marcus. No, but he's not blind. Or stupid. Gerald set the brooch down carefully. He came by the house yesterday, asking questions about Celeste's sudden interest in vintage weddings and unique venues. Before I could respond, the shop door chimed. Nolan walked in, stopping short when he saw his father. Dad? What are you doing here? Just leaving, actually. Gerald squeezed my shoulder as he passed. Remember what I said about authenticity, Felicity. Some things can't be copied no matter how hard people try. After he left, Nolan and I stood in uncomfortable silence. He looked tired, his usually perfect hair messy like he'd been running his hands through it. You left your ring, he said finally. You left me to face your sister alone. He winced. I talked to her. She agreed to change her wedding venue. That's not the point, Nolan. I picked up a damaged silk scarf, focusing on the torn edges rather than his face. She's been systematically trying to destroy anything good in my life, and you've been helping her do it. She's my sister, and I was supposed to be your wife. My voice cracked on the last word. But you couldn't even tell her to back off when she was literally stealing our wedding plans. I didn't think, he stopped, frustrated. Look, I brought something to show you. He pulled out his phone, showing me a series of texts from Celeste. My stomach turned as I read them, detailed questions about my wedding ideas, our private conversations, even photos she'd asked him to take of my design sketches. See? She was just excited about wedding planning. She wanted to help. I stared at him, realizing with sudden clarity that he truly couldn't see what was right in front of him. Or worse, he didn't want to. Your father said Marcus pulled the advertising campaign, I said quietly. Did you ever wonder why? Nolan's face clouded. Celeste said you must have said something to him. Of course she did. I laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. And you believed her just like you always do. The shop door chimed again. This time it was Marcus himself, looking uncomfortable but determined. Sorry to interrupt, he said. Felicity, could we talk? About Celeste. Nolan stepped between us. Whatever she told you about my sister. She hasn't told me anything, Marcus cut in. That's why I'm here. I need to know if I'm making a mistake trusting Celeste. The irony of the moment wasn't lost on me, Celeste's fiancé coming to me for the truth while her own brother stood there defending her lies. I looked at Nolan, giving him one last chance. Do you want to tell him about the texts? About how your sister has been planning to steal my wedding piece by piece? Nolan's silence was deafening. I think you should go, I told him, turning away to hide my tears. Both of you. Whatever Celeste is or isn't doing, it's not my problem anymore. As they left, I heard Marcus ask Nolan, Did you really not see what she was doing to Felicity? I didn't hear Nolan's response, but I didn't need to. His silence had already told me everything I needed to know about where his loyalties lay. What I didn't realize then was that Marcus's visit would set in motion a chain of events that would change everything, not just for me and Nolan, but for the entire Brooks family. A week after Marcus's visit to my shop, I received an invitation to Celeste's wedding. Not just any invitation, an exact replica of the custom design I'd sketched in my private journal, the one I'd only ever shown to Nolan. My hands shook as I read the date, exactly 2 weeks before what would have been my wedding day. I was still staring at it when Evelyn called. I know this is awkward, she said, her voice strained. But Celeste insists you come. She says it would mean so much to her. I bet it would. I traced the delicate pattern I'd spent months designing. Did she tell you where she got the invitation design? A long pause. Felicity, please. She's trying to make amends. By stealing my wedding? The bitterness in my voice surprised even me. Actually, Evelyn hesitated. That's part of why I'm calling. Celeste wants you to help with her dress. She says your vintage expertise would be perfect for the alteration she needs. I almost laughed. What dress? The one she found at that little boutique in Paris. The 1950s Dior you mentioned loving? My stomach dropped. I told Nolan about that dress during a late-night conversation, describing my dream of recreating it for our wedding. Now Celeste had somehow tracked down the original. Can't, I said firmly. Please, Evelyn's voice cracked. Things are so tense in the family. Gerald barely speaks to Nolan, Marcus is asking questions about everything, and Celeste, she's not herself. Maybe if you helped, showed her some kindness. Kindness? I interrupted. Like the kindness she showed me when she systematically stole every detail of my wedding? Or the kindness Nolan showed by helping her do it? The shop door chimed. Celeste walked in, wearing a triumphant smile and carrying a garment bag. I'll call you back, I told Evelyn, hanging up before she could respond. Surprise! Celeste sang out, laying the bag across my counter. I need your magic touch with this. It's a bit delicate and you're the only one I trust. She unzipped the bag, revealing the exact dress I'd dreamed of wearing. The ivory silk was just as beautiful as I'd imagined. How did you find it? I asked, my voice hollow. Oh, Nolan mentioned how much you loved it. I had my connections track it down. She smiled sweetly. Consider this my olive branch. You help me with the alterations, and maybe we can put all this unpleasantness behind us. I stared at her, finally seeing clearly what I should have seen months ago. This wasn't about the wedding at all. This was about power, about breaking me piece by piece. No, I said quietly. Excuse me. I said no. I zipped the garment bag closed. Take your dress and get out of my shop. Her smile vanished. You're being ridiculous. This is my wedding we're talking about. No, this was supposed to be my wedding. My dress. My designs. My dreams. I moved around the counter, anger giving me strength. But you couldn't stand that, could you? You had to take everything just to prove you could. You don't deserve any of it, she hissed, mask finally slipping. You're nothing but a second-hand shop girl who got lucky with my brother. I'm doing him a favor by showing him who you really are. And who are you, Celeste? Besides a thief of other people's dreams? She grabbed the garment bag. You'll regret this. When I'm done, you won't have anything left. Not your designs, not your reputation, and definitely not my brother. As she stormed out, I noticed Marcus standing just outside the shop window, his face dark with anger. He'd heard everything. I should have felt satisfied, knowing Celeste had finally shown her true colors to her fiancé. Instead, I felt empty, because I knew what came next would be worse than anything she'd done so far. Celeste Brooks didn't just want my wedding anymore. She wanted to destroy me completely, and I was running out of ways to stop her. I shouldn't have gone to Celeste's wedding, but something pulled me there, maybe the same instinct that makes people slow down to watch car crashes. I slipped into the church just as the ceremony was starting, staying in the back where shadows could hide me. Everything was mine. The vintage lace draped along the pews, the hand-pressed flower arrangements, even the specific shade of ivory I'd spent months tracking down. But seeing Celeste in my dream dress, that was the final twist of the knife. Beautiful ceremony, isn't it? I jumped. Gerald Brooks stood beside me, his expression unreadable. She stole everything, I whispered. Every single detail. I know. He handed me his phone. On the screen was my original wedding planning journal, photographs of every page. Nolan sent these to her months ago. I found them when I was checking the family cloud storage. My stomach lurched. He gave her everything? He thought he was helping. Gerald's voice was tired. He still doesn't see what she's really doing. The wedding march began to play, the exact vintage recording I discovered in an old record shop. I watched Celeste float down the aisle, wearing my dress, my smile, my dreams. Marcus stood at the altar, his face tight with tension. Our eyes met briefly, and I saw something like apology there. Then Celeste reached him, and the ceremony began. I should have left then. But I stayed, watching as the priest asked if anyone had any objections. The silence felt like a physical weight. Then Marcus cleared his throat. "I do," he said quietly. "I object." Church erupted in whispers. Celeste's face went white. "Marcus?" Her voice wavered. "What are you doing?" "I can't marry someone who builds their happiness on other people's pain." He turned to face the shocked guests. Everything about this wedding was stolen. The dress, the decorations, even the music. It was all copied from Felicity's plans. Plans that Celeste took without permission. "That's ridiculous." Celeste's voice rose shrilly. "Nolan, tell them." Nolan stood from his place in the front row, looking confused. "I just shared some ideas with you." "You said you wanted to help." "Help?" Marcus laughed bitterly. "Is that what you call systematically destroying your brother's relationship? Stealing every detail of his wedding?" "It's not stealing if he gave them to me," Celeste shouted, mask finally cracking. "Besides, I did her a favor. Someone like her doesn't deserve a Brooks family wedding. She's nothing but a second-hand shop girl who has more class and creativity in her little finger than you'll ever have," Gerald interrupted, his voice carrying through the church. "And who just watched you reveal your true self to everyone who matters." The silence that followed was deafening. I looked around at the shocked faces of the guests, at Marcus's quiet dignity, at Nolan's dawning horror. But it was Celeste's expression that stopped me, cold, pure, undiluted hatred directed straight at me. "You," she snarled. "You planned this. You turned them all against me." She lunged forward, but instead of coming for me, she grabbed the vintage lace runner from the nearest pew and yanked. Carefully arranged flowers crashed to the floor. In seconds, she was tearing through the decorations like a tornado, destroying everything she'd stolen from me. "Celeste, stop." Nolan tried to grab her arm, but she shoved him away. "This is all your fault," she screamed at me. "You took everything from me, my brother, my fiancé, my family's respect. I'll make sure you never have anything of your own." As security finally pulled her away, I caught Nolan's eye. The guilt and shame on his face should have felt like victory. Instead, I just felt empty. I slipped out during the chaos, but not before I heard Celeste's final threat. "This isn't over, Felicity. I'll make you pay for this." Walking home in the fading light, I realized she was right about one thing. It wasn't over. Because now I had to decide. Was protecting myself worth destroying what remained of the Brooks family? And more importantly, could I live with either choice? The answer would change everything, I just didn't know how much yet. The morning after the failed wedding, I found Celeste waiting outside my shop. She wasn't wearing designer clothes anymore, just jeans and a sweater that made her look almost normal. Almost human. "We need to talk," she said quietly. I unlocked the door, letting her follow me inside. The shop felt different somehow, like a stage set for whatever was about to happen. "I lost everything yesterday," Celeste said, running her finger along a vintage dress rack. "Marcus won't return my calls. Mother can barely look at me. Even Nolan." Her voice cracked. "I didn't make you do any of it," I said, keeping the counter between us. "You chose to steal my wedding plans. You chose to lie. Because you took my brother from me." She whirled around, mask cracking. "He was all I had, and you just walked in with your perfect vintage finds and your creative talent and your authenticity." She spat the word like poison. "Nolan made his own choices." "Did he?" She pulled out her phone. "Because he's outside right now, ready to choose again." My heart stopped as Nolan walked in, looking trapped between us. "Tell her," Celeste demanded. "Tell her what you decided." Nolan wouldn't meet my eyes. "The family needs to heal, Felicity. We need to put this behind us. Maybe if you apologize to Celeste." Apologized? The word felt like glass in my mouth. For turning Marcus against her. For humiliating her at the wedding. I stared at him, finally seeing the truth. You still don't get it, do you? She didn't just steal my wedding plans, Nolan. She tried to steal my entire life, and you helped her do it. I never meant. No, you never meant anything. That's the problem. I turned to Celeste. You want an apology? Fine. I'm sorry I ever thought I could be part of this family. I'm sorry I wasted months loving someone who couldn't even see what was right in front of him. That's not good enough, Celeste said. You destroyed my life. Now I'll destroy your business. I've already called every supplier in the city, told them about how you sell knockoffs as authentic vintage. Actually, a new voice interrupted, you won't be doing that. Marcus stood in the doorway, holding a folder. I recorded everything, Celeste. Every threat, every lie, every attempt to destroy Felicity's reputation. I think the police would be very interested in this pattern of harassment. Celeste's face went white. You wouldn't. Try me. His voice was steel. The only reason I haven't turned this over already is because of Felicity. She asked me to wait to give you a chance to walk away. Is that true? Nolan asked me. I nodded. I didn't want to destroy your family, Nolan. I just wanted to protect myself. Felicity. He reached for my hand, but I stepped back. No. We're done. All of us. I looked at Celeste. Take your brother and go. Build whatever story you need to explain your failed wedding. I don't care anymore. You're making a mistake, she said, but her voice trembled. The only mistake was thinking I needed any of this. I opened the door. Goodbye, Celeste. Goodbye, Nolan. They left silently, Nolan casting one last desperate look over his shoulder. Marcus stayed behind. You could have destroyed them, he said quietly. Why didn't you? I touched a vintage silk scarf, the one that had started everything. Because I don't want to be like her. Some things are worth more than revenge. What will you do now? I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in months. What I've always done. Find beautiful things that others threw away and give them new life. Just, maybe not for the Brooks family anymore. As Marcus left, I turned the shop sign to open. Outside life went on. Inside, surrounded by the vintage pieces I'd lovingly restored, I finally understood. Sometimes the most valuable things we find aren't the ones we're looking for, but the parts of ourselves we discover along the way. And no one could steal that from me, not even Celeste Brooks. 6 months after Celeste's failed wedding, I stood in my new studio space, surrounded by the soft whisper of vintage silk and leather. The morning light filtered through tall windows, catching on the brass fixtures I'd salvaged from an old department store. Everything here had a story just like me. The bell chimed as Evelyn Brooks walked in, looking elegant but uncertain. This is beautiful, Felicity, she said, touching a restored Chanel jacket. Gerald said you'd done something special with the place, but this… Thank you. I adjusted a display, giving my hands something to do. I wasn't sure you'd come. Gerald insisted. He wants to talk about investing in your business. She paused, watching me carefully. Celeste left for Paris last week. I nodded, unsurprised. And Nolan? Taking assignments overseas. I think he finally understands what he lost. She moved closer, her voice softening. We all do. Before I could respond, Marcus appeared in the doorway. Since the wedding, he'd become an unexpected ally, helping me source rare vintage pieces through his business connections. Ready for the meeting? He asked, then noticed Evelyn. Mrs. Brooks, perfect timing. Did you tell her about the investment offer? I was just getting to that. Evelyn pulled out an envelope. Gerald and I want to help you expand. Your talent for restoration, your eye for beauty, it shouldn't be limited to one shop. Inside the envelope was a business proposal, funding for a chain of high-end vintage restoration boutiques, with me as creative director. The kind of opportunity I'd once dreamed about sharing with Nolan. I don't know, I said slowly. The Brooks family and I don't have the best history with partnerships. That's exactly why it needs to be you, Gerald said, appearing behind his wife. Someone who chose integrity over acceptance. Who showed our family what we'd become. And what about Celeste? Nolan? They'll learn to live with it, Gerald said firmly. Just like they're learning to live with their choices. Marcus touched my arm gently. You don't have to decide now. But don't let what happens stop you from building something amazing. I looked around my studio, at the pieces I'd rescued and restored, at the sketches for designs that were entirely my own. Then I noticed something, a familiar orange box sitting on my counter. What's this? Found it at an estate sale, Marcus said, smiling. Thought you might want it back. Inside was the Hermes scarf from that first day with Nolan. But instead of feeling pain, I felt something else, closure. Okay, I said, looking at Gerald and Evelyn. But I have conditions. This is my vision, my designs. No compromises. We wouldn't want it any other way, Gerald replied. Later, after they'd left, I stood in my studio's doorway, watching the sunset paint the city gold. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I'm sorry. For everything. N. I didn't respond. Some vintage pieces are better left in their boxes, preserved as memories of who we used to be. Instead, I walked to my workbench where a damaged 1940s evening gown waited for restoration. Its beading was scattered, its seams frayed, but I could see its potential. Just like I'd finally seen my own. The bell chimed again. A young woman walked in, wearing uncertainty like I once had. I found this at a thrift store, she said, holding up a worn designer bag. Everyone says it's not worth fixing, but you see something in it, I finished, recognizing that familiar hope. Let me show you what it could become. As I led her to my workbench, I realized something. Sometimes the most valuable things we restore aren't the vintage pieces we find, but the parts of ourselves we thought were broken beyond repair. And sometimes, just sometimes, letting go of a dream makes room for something even better to take its place. I picked up my tools and began to work, ready to write my own story, one stitch at a time.